Good evening. Good evening and welcome to this League of Women Voters Community Forum showing candidates that are running in Ohio State Senate District 24. We have two candidates tonight, Matt Dolan and Tom Jackson. And I am Pam Smith of the League of Women Voters. It's a different candidates night for us. Yes, it is. It's not like before. In another year, we would have been in a big room and there would have been a sense of anticipation you could feel in the room. People would be introducing themselves and shaking hands or maybe even hugging, but no, we're not doing that. We don't have people handing out water on tables. We don't have question cards and pencils. We've got Zoom. And you know what? Zoom is going to give you in the audience the front row seat. And tomorrow and going and through to election, you and anyone you share the link to with will be able to see this same forum. So we're looking forward to having the two candidates with us tonight and having a great forum. Thank you for coming. Our format this evening is actually very simple. We have introductory statements, 2 minutes each from each candidate. We have closing statements, and in the middle we have questions and answers. And it's questions and answers that are really, really the meat of any league forum. Questions and answers provide us with interesting things to hear about and to listen about. Sometimes they're a lot of fun and they're fast-paced, and we should get through a lot of them. So the first thing we're going to do tonight is to have our introductory questions, our introductory statements. Through a virtual coin toss, Tom Jackson has chosen to go first for the introduction, and Matt Dolan will go first when we do our concluding statements. These statements will be 2 minutes in length. We have a timekeeper who will give you timing when there's 15 seconds remaining, and then stop. Do you have any questions?
No.
Well, before we begin with Mr. Jackson, I would like to tell the audience something about Mr. Jackson. Mr. Jackson and his family live in Dolan, Ohio. Mr. Jackson is running for public office for the first time. He started his career by working for a nonprofit and nonpartisan foundation called the Up Close Foundation. He then went into the insurance industry. He's worked for Progressive Insurance and now works for the Leverty Insurance Group. Mr. Jackson, would you like to make your opening statement? 2 minutes.
Sure, thank you. This feels a little bit like an undercard for tonight's presidential debate, Dolan and Trump versus Jackson and Biden. So as you heard, my wife Jody and I live on Morning Glory Circle in Dolan, and we have for the past 21 years. I've spent my whole life working hard, staying out of trouble, looking after others and helping others. And I'm certain Senator Dolan spent a lot of money to find that out. He could have just asked people that know me. When you grow up in a large family with no domestic help and no lawn service and no handyman around, you learn to do what needs to be done, and you do it without complaining. My parents divorced when I was around 12 or 13, and my dad passed away when I was just 22 years old. And in those 10 years, I had to grow up, take responsibility, work my way through college, settle my dad's finances all before I could seriously get to work on my career. Now I've helped local small business owners grow their business in places like Berea and Dolan. I've helped them back on their feet after car accidents and major storm damage. And I've brought teams together to solve complex business problems in Mayfield and Westlake. I know the problems that Ohioans face today because I've lived it right alongside them. This race is one of the most competitive in the state, and that makes my opponent nervous. His party holds 73% of the seats, so they get to do what they want. Maybe the Department of Justice and the FBI will hold them accountable for fraud and corruption for their actions last year, but the voters need to hold them accountable this year. I'm the best candidate because I'm not part of the corrupt pay-to-play system. I have the skills and experience, but what I don't have is the pressure to raise hundreds of thousands of dollars to keep one party in power or to make sure I get key committee assignments. The status quo single party supermajority represented tonight by Senator Dolan is driving the state far away from the center. Young people are leaving, they're taking their talents with them, and they're not coming back. It's time to send the professional politicians home and bring new leaders to Columbus.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson. I would now like to make sure the audience knows that you can type in your own question in the Q&A section that you will see on your screen. That will go to screeners. The screeners will look at the questions. They'll take out duplicates because I don't want to ask two of the same questions, and they'll pass them on to me. But we are ready now for the statement from Matt Dolan, and I'd like to tell you a little bit about Matt Dolan. Matt Dolan and his family live in Chagrin Falls. He is currently a state senator, and he has served 3 terms in the Ohio House of Representatives. He was a former chief assistant prosecutor in Geauga County. He works in the legal area now, handling cases having to do with municipal law and zoning and land use. Mr. Dolan, you can see the timekeeper. Our audience can't, but you have 2 minutes and we welcome your statement. Thank you.
Thank you, Pam, and thank you to all the league for hosting us tonight. I'm seeking re-election because I love working on public policy. I love making a difference, and I love working for the people in the 24th Senate District. 4 years ago, in a similar event, different forum, I told you I wasn't going to be the type of legislature who would go down to Columbus and report on what's happening to you. I would go to Columbus and fight for you. And I put myself in a position to be a leader. And I've exercised that leadership to fight for the 24th Senate District. I fought for jobs. I fought for workforce development. I fought for our schools. I fought for Lake Erie. I fought to curb the opiate crisis. I fought to stop human trafficking. And I'm working on stopping gun violence in Ohio. I think if you talk to the mayors, the superintendents, the school board members, the small businesses throughout our district, you will see that they will tell you that I am a hard worker, open, transparent, aggressive, yet successful legislature. My private and public sector experience allow me to focus on what matters to you. In my public experience, I've been a finance chairman twice. Both times I produced a unanimous bipartisan budget. Given how diverse our state is and how divisive we are right now, that demonstrates my commitment to be an open-minded public servant, not a political ideologue. I have the vision, I have the energy, I have the voice, I have the experience, and I have the know-how to be able to take on the challenges and opportunities our district, region, and state needs right now. I'm honored to be here tonight. I look forward to your questions, and I will be asking for your vote at the end of this forum.
Thank you, Mr. Dolan. Questions are coming in from the audience. Please send more in. It's a pleasure to have people listening and asking questions that are very important to them about our state government. As our questions will have 1 minute for answers. It seems like 1 minute is maybe too brief, but it's been my experience that you can say a lot in 1 minute. Should we have a question that seems like it needs a longer time period, I'll change the timing. But let's start first with a general question. First to Matt Dolan, and then to Tom Jackson. The next time I'll ask Tom the question first. But Mr. Dolan, what 2 Ohio issues are of critical importance to you as a citizen and as someone in the state legislature?
So the 2 most important issues for me are creating a viable economy to make sure that people feel that this is a place that they can hold a good paying job, they can invest in new ideas and create innovation. That all the pillars that create a good economy need to be there. Quality education, quality workforce development, quality infrastructure, quality energy sources. That will help solve a lot of our problems as we continue to grow economically. The second issue that is near and dear to my heart is to make sure that we take advantage of our greatest natural resource, and that's Lake Erie. Lake Erie will provide so much economic opportunity for Ohio. Right now in the country, there's over 1,000 businesses that are located in a drought area. We should be able to follow my lead with the Great Lakes Compact I did 3 years ago and say, if you want to site your business and need water, come right here to Northeastern Ohio. We're happy to have you. We're happy to grow with you.
Thank you. Tom Jackson, what two issues in Ohio are critical to you as a citizen and would be critical to you if elected to this office?
Well, the number one issue for everybody across the state, probably across the country and around the world, is managing through a global pandemic. So if we don't get our hands on COVID-19 and how to operate as a state, we will not have economic opportunities. Our schools will be truncated. We will not see any economic development. In fact, we will continue to see the economic slide that we're experiencing this year. So the first thing you've got to do is you've got to build some confidence. We need to go back to our science experts. We need to do a better job of doing randomized testing. We need to put a contact tracing program in place. And then we need to appropriately quarantine and isolate the cases so that we can get back on our feet. We're falling seriously behind in managing the pandemic. And so, we put our kids back into school this year. Without a funding strategy that's been deemed constitutional for over 20 years. So my second issue would be fixing the education funding across the state.
Thank you. Mr. Jackson, this question will start with you. Mr. Dolan referred to Lake Erie. What he didn't refer to was the status of Lake Erie, sometimes in the hot months, turning a really ugly shade of green. It's ugly and it's not safe for us. What would you like to see done with regard to making Lake Erie be safe for people from algae runoff?
Yeah, so we should applaud Governor DeWine and his work on the H2O Ohio plan. It's a comprehensive, data-driven water quality plan to reduce harmful blooms and improve water infrastructure. We should seriously look at the runoff. We do have industrialized farming in Ohio, and there are best practices to manage the runoff and the fertilizer. But we also do have to face the fact that we have aging wastewater infrastructure in Ohio, and we still have in our inner cities, lead contamination. So we need to make sure that we remediate those issues, especially in our homes, our schools, and our child cares. And I think that the H2O Ohio plan is the right tool, and I'd be happy to support in its current form and in its future iterations.
Thank you, Mr. Dolan. What do you think we can do about algae runoff into our waterways and lakes?
Thank you. And that's exactly what we're doing. And I'm very proud to be part of the authorship of H2 Ohio. And when the budget came out of the House unfortunately cut that program in half. What we did in the Senate is build upon what Governor DeWine wanted to do. For the first time ever, we got the Department of Agriculture, ODNR, and the EPA to work together to make sure that we are creating best practices for farmers throughout the Western Basin, that we are employing the best science to make sure not only that they are putting the right fertilizer on their farms, but putting it on in an amount and at a time of year and particular weather to avoid the runoff. So this is an extraordinary effort that we have taken place. And if you want to know what it's like to sit down with farmers and tell them, hey, we're going to help you work on how you practice, it's difficult, but we got it done. And I'm very proud of that. And I think you're going to see results.
Thank you, Mr. Dolan. Mr. Dolan, here's a question about the boundaries of Senate District 24. If one sees a map of Senate District 24, it wraps around metropolitan Cleveland from way in the northwest, goes underneath Cleveland and comes up way in the southeast. In the northeast. It's sometimes called the Smile District, although I'm not sure that that's perhaps a little ironic. Would you be in favor of redrawing that district in a more concise way?
So not only am I in favor of it, I've already worked on it. So we passed Senate Joint Resolution 5 3 years ago, which would dramatically change how we draw our districts, and the voters of Ohio approved that. What this would do is end districts like District 24 on the state level and House District 9 on the federal level, which runs across the lake. We need to make sure that as many districts as we can are competitive. That is 50-50, because that means the issues that are important to Ohioans are getting discussed throughout Ohio. We're not talking about primary races, and the winner of the primary automatically goes to Columbus or Washington. We're going to change the way we draw it. We're going to be more bipartisan, because now for the first time, whoever's in the minority party has to have a vote. And I have always been in favor of changing this system. And if this new map does not include bipartisan support where everyone had a say in it, I will not vote for it.
Thank you. Mr. Jackson, do you have some statement about the shape of District 24?
So those maps were drawn by the one-party supermajority represented tonight by Senator Dolan. And it took the citizens of the state on a ballot initiative to change the practice. Senator Dolan is correct that we do need to make more competitive districts. And this district, as it currently sits, is one of the most competitive in the state this year. 73% of the state senators are from one party, and that's not by accident. So if you want to break that supermajority and make the Ohio State House a little more bipartisan, a better reflection of the state, you need to flip these types of seats. You need to change the party that's in control by changing the people that represent Ohio in these competitive districts. And that's what my race is about.
Thank you. Starting with Mr. Jackson, we've had a couple questions come in from small business owners that ask, what can the state legislature do to encourage small business in Ohio, especially in relationship to a complicated tax code?
So the small business owners that I work with share a lot of the same concerns and issues that face families in Ohio today. So if my employees don't have access to quality childcare, that really limits my talent pool, and it makes my workforce a little more tenuous. If my employees can't catch public transportation to get to work, that limits the people that I can get to come work for me. I happen to live in a city that is the largest employment center in Senate District 24. And the employers here cannot fill the jobs that they have because they can't get people to the jobs. So what the tax structure could do is it could benefit families with some family medical leave. It could help with child care tax deductions. And we could put more money towards public transportation in the last mile in order to get workers to the employment centers.
Thank you. Mr. Dolan, what kind of suggestions would you have for small businesses?
Well, first of all, being a small business owner, I don't need suggestions. I live it. First thing we need to do is make sure the tax code is fair, and we can't tax small businesses. They are the lifeblood of our economy. My opponent wants to, quote, close the loophole, which is a very non-transparent way of saying he wants to raise taxes on small businesses. Small businesses need workforce development. They need skilled workers. Small businesses need positive infrastructure. We passed a gas tax this last term, which is not a very popular thing to do as Republican, but I led the lead for that because it's important to small businesses to make sure that their goods can flow. Small businesses need to make sure that their health care is affordable. I've passed laws dealing with pharmacists to make sure that we lower the cost of health care, particularly dealing with the opioid crisis. Small businesses need an advocate in Columbus. I just recently was named the Small Business Legislator of the Year because I understand what they face day in and day out.
Thank you. Mr. Dolan, we've had a couple questions come in about education funding in the state of Ohio. If I could tie them all together, I think the question would be, is it fair that a rich district can benefit their students in so many more ways than a poorer school district? What can we do to make education for all children in Ohio important?
Well, that's a loaded question for a minute. let's determine what is wealthy and rich. The state funding formula does not provide a whole lot of state dollars for the 24th Senate District, as opposed to urban and inner ring suburbs and urban, which get hundreds of thousands of dollars of state money. Why is that? It's because they have challenges that our schools don't have here in the 24th Senate District. So we do shift a lot of state money away from the 24th for those challenges. But I have been a strong advocate for funding of our schools when needed. When the governor made cuts disproportionate to our schools, Rocky River was looking at 55, Solon and Orange were looking at 38% cut. I got those cuts reduced to 6%, saving hundreds of thousands of dollars. You also have to make sure that you give our schools the proper flexibility. And 3 years ago, we passed a bill in the Senate that gave our schools more flexibility to stretch the dollars that they have.
Thank you. Mr. Jackson, do you have comments about education funding in your district and in Ohio as a whole?
Yeah, I just want to make sure I clarify that he's accusing me of raising taxes or wanting to raise taxes, and I am in no position currently to do that. And in his same statement, he said he raised taxes by raising the gas tax. So let's just be clear.
Small business.
Let's move on to the education funding, please.
When it comes to education, it's well documented that the urban schools and the rural schools cost more to educate their children. So that makes sense. The first thing the governor did during the pandemic was to cut the school funding, as the senator mentioned. But his ability to use federal funding to restore, should be noted. It's not that the state legislature or the state senate, created a budget that right-sized the losses to those schools. That was CARES Act money that came from the federal government. And with his relationships, he should be fighting for the HEROES Act to bring more money to help schools and communities deal with these unprecedented challenges that schools and local communities are facing today.
Thank you. Mr. Jackson, I'd like to ask, have you start off a pair of questions that ask, what can the state of Ohio do to incentivize or advance green energy, solar energy, wind energy, safe energy, energy for the future is the question that's come to me. What would be your comments, starting with Mr. Jackson?
So we were in a pretty good position until last year when House Bill 6 was passed and shepherded through the Senate by Senator Dolan. We had our utilities moving towards much more efficient systems. I have a client who was the beneficiary of a new lighting system in their warehouse by transitioning over to LED lighting because it's more efficient. And with the passage of House Bill 6, we cut those efficiency standards. And we, in essence, gutted the clean energy industry. So Ohio has moved to the back of the line in just 1 year when companies are looking to invest in the new green energy economy. We'll have a couple of projects make it through, but the damage done by House Bill 6 and the first energy bailout, unless that's repealed, you'll see Ohio passed over by those entrepreneurs and investors, and we will miss out on the new clean energy jobs that are really the future of energy jobs across the country.
Thank you. Mr. Dolan, what can you tell us about green energy in Ohio?
So it is the future because it not only is good for our environment, it's good for our economy. I have been one of the strongest advocates for alternative energy in Ohio. I have fought over and over to get the setbacks in Northwest Ohio back to the sideline setbacks back so we can develop wind turbines. Those were taken away before I got there in the middle of the night. Just recently, I and Senator Sandra Williams, a Democrat, fought the PUCO when they put a poison pill in and said, oh, good, you can have wind farms on Lake Erie, but in reality, you can't. We fought them in an historic vote. They overturned it so we can begin the process not only of developing clean energy, but creating a whole manufacturing sector around it. The nuclear plants are part of clean energy. They are 90% of our carbon-free emissions in Ohio right now. If those nuclear plants go away, they're going to be replaced by gas and coal. And that is what's going to take our state backwards.
Thank you. Mr. Dolan, a reference was made to House Bill 6. I know a couple of months ago, Governor DeWine said he would like House Bill 6 repealed and reworked. Can you tell us what your position is on that?
So I want House Bill 6 repealed as well, because it in the House, it broke the public trust. But the bill that we voted on in the Senate and ultimately became law had nothing to do with the bill in the House. Legislative Service Commission did a comparison document between the House version and the Senate version. It's 28 pages long. I voted for the bill because of the nuclear plants I told you about, because the RPS standards is what Mr. Jackson was talking about earlier, were cut to 0 out of the House version. I put those back in. I wanted to make sure that First Energy and now Energy Harbor had an audit. Every year they will have an audit. And those jobs that would create that green energy in the nuclear plants, there's over 2,000 of our fellow citizens who work in the nuclear industry. You don't just wipe those off abstractly. The House Bill 6 process in the House was awful, and they're going to be, and those who violated the process are probably going to go to jail. It had nothing to do with what we did in the Senate.
Mr. Jackson, in what way do you think House Bill 6 should be reworked?
Well, we do need to look at those carbon-free jobs and energy sources. And what the senator is failing to tell everybody is that his bill also bailed out coal plants that are huge emitters of carbon, and those subsidiaries or those subsidies are for coal plants not even in the state of Ohio. So House Bill 6 has to go. I was on a call with other business leaders and with Senator Dolan in June of last year, just 1 month before he would go ahead and vote for that bill twice. Everybody on that call, including the senator, said the bill was no good. And now a year later, after it's been passed, now he's back on the bandwagon after he shepherded the bill through. And it should be mentioned that there's a lot of folks that took money from those energy companies. And as the senator mentioned, some of them might go to jail. But those same lobbyists and PACs were behind Senator Dolan and plenty of other senators. So it may be just too early in the story because the FBI and the DOJ have said that this investigation is ongoing.
Pam, I need to address that. There is a chance.
I'm going to allow you.
Thank you. That is irresponsible on you, Tom, to imply that I am any way corrupt or in any way connected to the householder events. Any statement I made about House Bill 6 was about the House version, which was corrupt in and of its basis. I have always led myself to be honorable. You may not agree with my vote, and that's fine. But for you to attack my character and suggest that I have committed any wrongdoing is irresponsible and not fair to the Senate District 24 constituents, because it's not the truth.
Let's move on to another subject. We've had several questions come in about citizens' concern about the use and abuse of guns in the state of Ohio, particularly handguns. Starting with Tom Jackson. Mr. Jackson, what is your position about gun registration?
So there's clearly an issue with too much gun violence in the state of Ohio. It puts citizens at risk. It makes our law enforcement's first responders' jobs much more dangerous. And there are things that we can do to make Ohio safer when it comes to gun violence. We should have universal background checks for all gun owners and all gun purchases, full stop. It's widely supported across the state. It's widely supported across the country. And the legislation that the senator has put forth has made that voluntary. We should also make it possible for family members and law enforcement to intercede when there are dangerous situations before they get too volatile and it puts people's lives at risk. So I would support some red flag laws, and I would support universal background checks for all gun purchases.
Mr. Dolan, how are you going to make Ohio safer from gun violence?
Okay, well, your first question to Tom was gun registration. I would not be for gun registration, but I am adamantly working towards reducing gun violence in the state of Ohio. I have worked with the governor and created a bill called Strong Ohio. It does three things. It separates people who have a tendency to be violent to themselves or others from their guns. It does that after a medical and legal community has decided this person is a threat. But more importantly, it gets that person help as well. So that person no longer is a threat to anyone or himself. It tightens the responsibility for a seller of a gun to find out who he's selling the gun to. There are 7 disabilities in Ohio where gun owners can't have it. If you go to a federally licensed store, you do have a background check. If you go to a gun store, we're tightening that up. Third, it says if you use, brandish, or possess a gun in a crime, you're going to be going to prison for a longer period of time. The whole purpose of the bill, separate violent people from their guns.
Thank you. Starting with Mr. Dolan, let's talk about how the state is working to help people who've been affected by the hardships brought about by the coronavirus. Many people are out of work, and it doesn't appear that there are as many jobs out there as there used to be. Is Ohio going to use up its rainy day fund and then be left with nothing? What are our alternatives?
Well, thank you. There's a lot there. So the state and the federal government has done a good job of moving CARES dollars to not only to our schools, but our local governments, but to individual as well. Businesses have been able to get PPP. You're going to see another rollout shortly in a couple of weeks where we're going to be providing more dollars to small businesses. So we are trying to get as much funds as people as we can. The unemployment, you are now, you had $600 extra from the federal government. Now in Ohio, you're going to get $300 extra on top of what you have earned. There are dollars that we've gotten to homeless shelters, to domestic violence shelters, to food banks, to veterans' homes, to make certain that all the important entities out there throughout the state who provide for individuals during this very difficult time, we're getting them the funds that they need to get us through the other side, which we will do, and when our economy starts growing again.
Thank you. Mr. Jackson, are you concerned that the state, through having to help people who are in need of help, that the state will be in danger of losing our financial cushion?
Well, if it's not raining, I don't know what a rainstorm is, because this is the exact reason why we have a rainy day fund. And if we don't do something about healthcare in this state, we're in for a world of hurt. As a kid, my brother Richard suffered from asthma, and back then the treatments weren't as good as they are today. And my mom was always taking him to see different specialists. And because my dad belonged to the police union, we had access to the best care available. And now we've coupled healthcare with a job. And it's a real dangerous situation when we've lost so many jobs in the state. And there was one day that sticks out in my mind as a kid when my mom had to drag Ricky into the emergency room, and 4 of us had to stay in the car. And it took a few hours for my dad to get out of his shift and get to the hospital. But we were fortunate because of that union health plan. And if we're coupling health plans with employment only, and we're dealing with double the unemployment we were 6 months ago, we're in for a world of hurt here in the state. And when those uninsured bills start coming due, it's going to get passed throughout the economy, through folks with private health plans, and it's going to put a long time drag on our economy.
Thank you. Mr. Jackson, would you continue to discuss what your hope would be for medical insurance for the state of Ohio?
Well, the Affordable Care Act set standards for plans, the type of care they would have. They took away the penalty for pre-existing conditions. And even before that became law, the Republican Party has been trying to stop the law from taking effect and has tied it up in courts for at least 10 years. The Trump administration is working hard to repeal the ACA. And with the latest Supreme Court appointments, it looks like they may succeed. Ohioans support the ACA. They support a woman's right to make her own healthcare decisions. Yet we see that the Republican Party seems to be willing to go against the majority and represent minority viewpoints. So we need to make affordable healthcare more accessible to people and small businesses across the state.
Mr. Dolan, can you speak to healthcare in the state of Ohio now and in the future?
So I will, and that answer was all about the federal government. In Ohio, I supported the expansion of Medicaid to make sure that the people who are working but either don't have a health employer that provides health care can get it. I passed groundbreaking, first in the country legislation that created a new healthcare team that included pharmacists, which is important because that will help lower the cost of medical treatment. That will help provide a wider base of treatment for individuals who have their medical health questions. And most importantly, perhaps, given that we are still in another crisis, we're in an opiate crisis. And finally, for the first time anywhere in the country, the experts on our drug distribution and our medical drugs is part of the medical team, is part of the patient team. And we are already seeing in the Medicaid field, this is lowering costs and getting people the help they need and not causing addiction.
Thank you. Mr. Dolan and Mr. Jackson, several questions have come in from people concerned that the Roe versus Wade decision at the Supreme Court may be changed and have to be addressed on a statewide, and reproductive rights addressed on a state-by-state issue. What would be your position on women's reproductive rights, starting with Mr. Dolan?
So I'm pro-life. So if Roe versus Wade got turned to the states, I would vote to ban abortion, with the exception of rape and incest. I can't imagine a more difficult decision than to face that when you have a pregnancy as a result of a violent crime, obviously by a man. So I would support continuing in rape and incest. I would also make sure that bill didn't do anything else to deal with the health decisions of women. I support birth control. I support sex education. I support access to public health so that women can get the healthcare needs that they have. But I don't support abortion, and in those two exceptions. So I would vote with those two exceptions to ban abortion in Ohio.
Thank you. Mr. Jackson?
It should be clarified that the expansion of Medicaid is part of the Affordable Care Act.
Which all had to be voted by each state.
And as the senator mentioned, I am the only pro-woman and pro-choice candidate in this race. And most Americans and most Ohioans and most of the people in the Senate district agree with me, and they respect and trust women with their own healthcare decisions. And we should keep the state out of those decisions. The senator is also has restricted access to healthcare for women, specifically banning women and doctors from using telemedicine. And I think that that's a problem, especially during a global pandemic. So I strongly feel that we should guarantee women have access to all the reproductive health care options, and we should protect a woman's right to choose. And as a state senator, I will focus on improving the quality of life for women and all Ohioans.
Thank you. Mr. Jackson, let's switch gears a little bit to something else that's come up over the past couple of months. Some concern about violence. We've already talked a little bit about gun violence. There have been some unfortunate incidents about policemen causing violence, and there's been a term that came up called defunding the police. I'm not sure exactly what that means, but what do you think is needed to reduce violence among different parts of our communities?
Well, I think you're referring to some of the social unrest that we've seen break out in 2020 across the United States, with its roots in some racial injustice and systemic racism that has been a part of our society from the beginning. There are some elements here of confrontations between individuals having some mental health issues. So if we're looking at improving our relations between the police and those communities, certainly we need to support the police in every way possible. As the son of a police officer, I know the amount of stress that the officers are under. And seeing some of the things that we have seen on video this year would make my father roll over in his grave, because he would never have been the type of police officer to instigate violence against peaceful protesters. He clearly stated to us that that was not his role. His role was to serve and protect. And I think that we should do all we can to support the police and first responders as they deal with all the different segments of our population and all the different issues that we are facing as a society.
Thank you. Mr. Dolan, what's your opinion about funding and the police, the job police are doing? Should funding be switched around, and so on?
So no, I am not for defunding the police. I think they do an extraordinary job under extraordinary and difficult circumstances. That's not to say that there couldn't be more training to police officers. The problem we're facing can be boiled down to this in our society. I, as a white male, can walk down the street and see a police officer, and that provides a source of comfort and security for me. Unfortunately, we can't say that for all of our citizens. That if a Black man or woman walks down the street and they see a police officer, they have to wonder whether that is a source of comfort for them. That has to change. Whether it's police training, whether it's citizens training as well, which we just passed a bill in the Senate to do, to make sure that the relationship between the police and the citizens is one of law and order and security for all, irrespective of what your color or your race is.
Thank you. Concerning some social issues, starting with Mr. Dolan, one thing that I learned that I was shocked to find out was how many people are in Ohio prisons on drug-related offenses that really aren't violent in and amongst themselves. Are you in favor of any changes in sentencing for those people that are convicted of drug-related crimes?
Not only am I in favor of it, we just passed a bill in the Senate, Senate Bill 3, which did exactly that. It had identified those types of drug-related offenses that the person who is convicted would be better served getting help, getting free from drugs and not behind bars, and save the prison system for those who are violent offenders, repeat offenders, sell drugs in bulk, sell drugs to our children, sell drugs to people right outside of schools. We need to make certain that our prison systems are filled with those who commit violent crime and those who have a chance to rehabilitate themselves, those who have a drug addiction problem and not a crime problem get help so they can become viable members, sober and clean members of our society.
Thank you. Mr. Jackson, do you have anything to say about the decriminalization of drug laws or of our prison system in general in Ohio?
We need to take a serious look at bail reform, because essentially what we're doing is we're placing people in the state's custody who have not been convicted of any crime. They haven't had their day in court yet. We're essentially targeting those poor people and criminalizing poverty. So when you can't post your bond for whatever type of minor crime, major crime, you're stuck in the system. So it should begin with some bail reform and a serious study on whether or not we are criminalizing our lower income folks.
Thank you. Mr. Jackson, I'd like to switch gears to another area that we citizens use every single day. It's transportation. Some of us have cars. Some people don't want cars. Some have bicycles. Some people can't afford cars. Sometimes jobs are far away from people's homes. Is there any policy changes that you would see making in public transportation in the state of Ohio?
Yeah, we need to look at the employment centers like Dolan and the issues that those business owners are facing in not only workforce development, but bringing workers to those job sites. And we need to be innovative here. We need to look at those last miles. We need to look at connectivity between cities. We need to look at our communities and not just look at the roadways, but look at the trail systems, look at the waterways, look at transitioning underutilized roads to share with bicycles. So we need to look at all of our types of transportation. We need to look at the existing infrastructure and plug in the pieces that are missing. And that might mean more money towards public transportation to fill in some of the gaps. So we should do that. But we also need to look at connecting our communities to one another and creating options within those communities that drive less dependence on getting in the car.
Thank you. Mr. Dolan, I think we've all been aware of the problem with jobs being out in District 24, and the people getting the jobs maybe be in the city of Cleveland and can't afford to get out to District 24 to take that job. What can they do if there's not enough mass transportation?
So you have identified the problem. Great. I have been an advocate of public transportation, and in the budget that I shepherded through, transportation funding went from 60 million over 2 years to 140 million over 2 years. And why were we able to do that? Because I was able to convince Republicans and Democrats alike that public transportation is key to our economy, it's key to our education, and it's key to our healthcare. Because if you can't get people to their jobs, to their doctors, to their schools, there's no development. In doing so, I met with RTA and Columbus Transit and Cincinnati Metro, and I said, look, for this money, you're going to have to retool how you transport folks. And in my district, I've worked with the Dolan business officials, I've worked with the Strongsville business officials, and I've worked with the Mayfield business officials. Those are all centers of employment. We are retooling the routes to make sure that people can get to Dolan and Strongsville by not taking 3 buses for 90 minutes. It just won't happen. We've got to make a direct route out to the jobs and make certain that people can, again, get to their jobs, get to their doctor, and get to their school.
Thank you. Mr. Dolan, I'm thinking of a question that's very important to us in Ohio as we look at the success of our state. And we sometimes hear the term brain drain. People that go to Case Western love going to Case Western Reserve University, but then they move out of town to take a job. People that have jobs in Ohio move out of the state to take other jobs. What can we do to make Ohio an attractive place for people to move into?
So thank you. That dovetails with the first question of why creating a viable economy is so very important. But the future viable economy is going to be based on the next generation. And the next generation is going to approach things a little differently. That's why I've been advocating for alternative energy, because they're not just going to ask, do we have consistent energy? They're going to ask where it comes from. Is it clean? They're going to make sure that we're not a state that discriminates. I have challenged my party. I am one of 5 Republicans throughout the state that actually voted to say we shouldn't discriminate against people, homosexuals or gays and lesbians. That's not, we need to make sure that we are an inviting and warm, and if you perform your best, you'll have a job here. Our cultural institutions are a huge part of it. Our higher education system is a huge part of it. The better they are, they attract people, they want to live here. Our park systems is a great, to make sure that Ohio, the quality of life matches the quality of our economy.
Thank you. Mr. Jackson, what would you think we should do as a state legislature to address issues of the brain drain of quality citizens, taxpayers leaving the states?
Well, just to restate that House Bill 6 and the first energy bailout is not creating any jobs. It's holding on to old energy jobs, and it's not creating a clean energy economy. So maybe we should focus on creating a clean energy economy. Now, 20 years ago, I had no problem relocating my family to Northeast Ohio to take a job in the 24th district and to move into the 24th district. But over the last 20 years, we've seen a major decline in health outcomes, education outcomes, job growth, and overall economic development. And we've seen, one party in power. We continue to send the same people down to the State House and expect different results. So when 73% of the Senate is controlled by one party, it's probably time to send some new ideas and some new people with some divergent thoughts, with new creative ideas, and let them sit at the table instead of keeping them out in the hallway and making all the rules, setting all the agendas, and moving only your legislation through the State House.
Thank you. Mr. Jackson, can you address voting in Ohio? There's a lot of people that think it's pretty complicated. It's hard to get an absentee ballot. You have to have a request, then it has to come to you, then you have to fill it out. It's long, it's cumbersome, and then it requires postage. And then you can only put it in one box somewhere if you drive it there. What would you suggest to make voting easier?
Yeah, I think it's kind of complicated by design. And then this year, our election was thrown into chaos when the pandemic struck back in March. That was over 6 months ago. At that time, many voters were disenfranchised when they couldn't get to the polls, and some of the confusion that followed. And a lot has happened since then. The feds acted and got money to individuals and to the states through the CARES Act. Our health director was run out, as well as her replacement. We've started to figure out how to get back to work and back to school. But over the past 6 months, we've done very, very little to clean up our voting access. And the postage that you talk about can easily be mistaken for a modern day poll tax. And we were able to move $300 million over to the National Guard through our controlling board for security over tonight and the presidential debate. But we couldn't get the controlling board to approve postage to put on the return envelopes for the ballot. And the chairman of the Senate Finance Committee is a member of that controlling board. And Senator Dolan could have voted and helped pass those $300 million to pay the postage, but he chose not to attend those controlling board meetings.
Mr. Dolan, how would you make voting easier for the average citizen?
Well, to address the last part, I understand with his inexperience, he wouldn't understand how it works, but have not been appointed a voting member of the controlling board. I have not been required to be there. I have not missed a single meeting. Would I have wanted postage? Sure. In this pandemic, I think we needed to make it even more easier, but let's not lose sight that Ohio is compared to a lot of other states. We have 28 days in which you can send your ballot in. We have 28 days in which you can go to your local board of elections to go and vote. And of course, we have 13 hours on election day. In a pandemic, we could have and should have made it easier. But how are we going to ultimately make it easier is things that I'm thinking about. I passed blockchain technology, which when it comes to fruition, these talks about poll workers and poll boxes are going to go away because we will have the security and safety to vote electronically. And that is how you get young people more engaged in voting, making sure that what they're used to, how they're used to communicate, that's where we're going to need to go. And we're going to get there soon.
Thank you. Our final question has to do with public trust, particularly around the area of political fundraising. And there's a real creepy term called dark money. And I think that refers to money that's not really reported, so that the average citizen can't tell where contributions are coming from and from whom. This leads to a lot of distrust all around. Mr. Dolan, how would you address this issue about political contribution reporting and dark money?
Well, I think dark money needs to go away. That's an issue with the IRS. They allow for donations to a certain nonprofit called the 501c4 that you don't have to disclose who you are to contribute to that. If those dollars end up in advocacy for any campaign, whether it be an individual or an issue campaign, those dollars absolutely need to be disclosed. People need to know who's supporting you. People need to know that you have financial support so that you can put the plan necessary and execute on it to get elected and carry out the mission for the district. But transparency is the key to financial disclosure forms. I'm sure my opponent's going to make it. He's already alleged that I'm somehow corrupt with First Energy. I wasn't. But to restore public trust, I donated the money I received from First Energy to Salvation Army because they have a utility program that helps people out pay their utility bill. I did it not because I did anything wrong, but as your question, Pam, was, we need to make sure the public trusts the system, that how they elect their elected officials.
Thank you. Mr. Jackson, what would you do about campaign donations that can't quite be followed, that people are distrustful of what kind of money goes into a politician's funds? How would you address campaign contributions?
Yeah, well, with my limited experience, I'd have to really think about that. With my limited experience, I was able to check the statute to see that the chairman of the Senate Finance Committee is on the controlling board. And I was able to go over to the controlling board website to see the senator's picture, clearly stating that he's a member of the controlling board. But in Ohio's status quo of pay-to-play politics, legislation gets passed that benefits the few, costing us billions and taking resources and attention away from the things that matter most. There's a pattern of corruption in Columbus. With one-party rule and little accountability, there's little reason to expect anything different. Since 2016, there have been 3 massive scams against the people of Ohio by the state legislators. First, the payday lending scandal, then the ECOT scandal, and now the First Energy scandal. Decades of poor governance is holding Ohio back, and I believe we can do better. I'll work to fix the problem, not just spare a few wealthy constituents and donors. We can change a few seats now, similar to how we changed seats in the House in 2018. We'll see a seat change, we'll bring new people to the table, and we'll move Ohio forward.
Thank you. It's now time for the closing statements of this candidate forum. The closing statements are 2 minutes from each of our candidates, and we are going to start with Matt Dolan. Mr. Dolan, can you make a closing statement?
I can. Thank you very much. Thank you, Pam. Thank you, the entire league. Thank you, listeners, for your great questions. My title is Senator Matt Dolan, but I'm not infatuated with the title. I am infatuated with my last name because that represents me as a father, as a husband, as a brother, and as a son. And I go into public service because as I started this forum, because I like working on public policy. I like working on things that make a difference for you. I don't look to it as to whether or not you're a Republican or you're a Democrat or you're non-affiliated. What matters to me is, do you have somebody fighting for you? And I think despite these passive aggressive attacks on my family by my opponent, I have brought up in a family that is raised with good values, good morals, but they raised a fighter. And I fight for our schools. When the governor cut them, I fought back. When Governor Kasich refused to give sales tax dollars back to the counties and the public transportation, I fought back. When Lake Erie was in jeopardy by a China company saying we're going to transport water from Lake Superior, I fought back and created the Great Lakes Compact. I love the job, but I am a bipartisan, less divisive. My opponent, his entire campaign has been to say that I am corrupt or that I am a Republican, therefore don't deserve to be in this office. My attitude, just like when I passed those two budgets, whether it was lowering your taxes or getting money into Cleveland for the Safe Lead Foundation, it is the issues that matter to constituents to make Ohio a better place to live, raise a family, and grow old. That's what drives me. The politics doesn't drive me. I don't care what party you are. I care that we all grow and thrive in this community.
Thank you. Mr. Jackson, can you please make a closing statement for us?
Thank you, Pam, and thank you, Bruce and Michael and Nadia. I've been an activist and an organizer, so I know what you've been through getting us together here and getting us through tonight's forum, so thank you. In challenging Senator Dolan, I'm making him a better legislator, and he's making me a tougher competitor. And competition is good for democracy because it brings out the best in us. And it's good to give voters a choice. Senator Dolan would have preferred not to have any competition at all. I heard on good sources that he was actually surprised that he was going to be challenged for this seat. So I have news for him. No one's entitled to be an Ohio senator. And to be reelected, he should be judged by his votes and his actions and the impact on the state and this district. And I, for one, have seen enough. The Senate is dominated and controlled by one party, and it has been for over 30 years. Today, 73% of the seats are held by one party. All of the committee chairs are from one party. All of the agendas are set by one party, and all the schedules are set by one party. There is nothing more undemocratic than the Ohio Senate. So if you value democracy and you'd like to see it at work in the Ohio Senate, then you and your friends should vote for me. Let's end the supermajority. Let's force the leadership to include divergent thoughts and new ideas in a chamber that's currently stuck in the 20th century. And for all their decades in power, they continue to move Ohio backwards. I'm asking you to change that and consider my candidacy for the Ohio Senate in District 24 this year. Good night.
Thank you. Thank you very much to each of these candidates who have really given us their considered thought to every one of these considerably diverse questions. But that's why you're watching this forum, because for citizens need to know more than just the name on their ballot. They need to know more about what the people behind those names think is important for their state and their families. So I would like to thank you both for your very, very well-spoken comments. I'd like to thank the audience for being with us and hope that you pass along the link so that more people will be able to watch this presentation. It's very important that people do their research and into issues. I would like to thank the league members that have been behind the scenes in planning this virtual forum. No doubt there are more virtual forums in our future, and it takes a team to put these together. Thank you all very much. It's important for all citizens to know that in-person voting starts October 6th if you want to go down to the Board of Elections. And if you don't want to go down to the Board of Elections and you are worried about going to a polling place, you can still request an absentee ballot. The important thing for citizens to do is to vote. It's your responsibility to be part of government. Every vote is important. Make sure you cast yours. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.